That ending was so predictable.
Okay, let's discuss. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Leandra the TBR0, and today I am defending predictability's place in reading. Before I get into this monologue, I want to encourage you to consider your own thoughts about predictability. Why do you find it so frustrating? Are there times where you find it a comfort? Please let me know down below in the comments, and feel free to get in a discussion with others who are viewing this video. But let's begin at the beginning and talk about why predictability does frustrate so many readers.
That ending was so predictable.
Well, predictability can be boring, right? I think the worst thing that happens is when you end a book and you think, I feel as though I've read this before. This has all been done before. That is probably the biggest insult that an author can hear, unless that was their intention. We enter books really hoping for escapism, expecting new things, new experiences, new twists, turns, new characters. So the idea that a book may be predictable in its narrative structure, in its themes, particularly in its ending, that can really be a letdown for a lot of readers, and you see a lot of people mention that that was the reason why they may have lowered their rating from a 5 to a 4 to a 3, and so on. As readers, we also tend to like a challenge, right? We see a puzzle before us. We see characters moving in a certain direction that we may not know what the result will be, but we sure like guessing. Are the characters going to survive before the chainsaw killer gets them in the woods? Is the detective going to solve the murder before the culprit gets away? Are these characters going to save the fantastical realm before the evil witch doctor gets them? I'm still working on my fantasy metaphors, sorry friends. But this desire to be able to guess, to theorize, to figure out if you can defeat the author, because really there is a bit of a back and forth, right? The reader sees the author as a bit of an opponent. It's a chess game. Can the author trick me, or can I be smart enough to figure out the ending before the author reveals it? Whether the author realizes they're in this chess game or not, that's up for debate and probably dependent on author to author experiences. But I can definitely attest that as a big mystery reader, a lot of us in the mystery community do feel as though we're playing blackjack and the author is the house. So if we get to the conclusion too quickly, too easily, we feel as though we've been cheated, as though we've wasted our time, and the author thinks they're more clever than they actually are, and it's just a bit of a bummer. And then finally, I'm only saying finally because it was the last reason I could come up with, but please feel free to expand upon the discussion in the comments. My feeling, and I've felt this more and more, which is really interesting because it's a new feeling for me, is that I predict an ending that I don't want the characters to experience. And when it comes to fruition, I'm even angrier because I could see it coming, and I didn't want that to be the ending. It's almost as if you feel the building tension, you're worried the author is going to make these choices, and you're just hoping, praying that the author is going to pivot, allow you to finally release the breath you've been holding, and when it comes to the end, and the characters do experience that horrific event, or they do end up getting some type of result that you didn't want, you are just so mad that you could see it coming and yet you kept going. Did I make sense there? I think I did. Oh well. Let's move on to why I think predictability is actually more common than we think and kind of beneficial.
Oh, this book has that trope in there? That's my favorite.
In defense of predictability, it can actually be really beneficial to a reader and advantageous for their selection of the next book on their TBR. As actor Leandra demonstrated, one thing that we really appreciate in books are the tropes. We love seeing tropes, themes, recurring settings. It's just something that we get really excited about, and we have preferences. And to be able to predict that our favorite trope is going to be in this book, 100%, we're going to be reading it a little bit faster. Likewise, we like the predictability of knowing what tropes we want to avoid. So for instance, if you absolutely hate the friends to lovers trope, well, it's good to know that it's going to be in that book. Likewise, if you know that a book has a haunted house setting, well, I wonder what's going to happen. There's probably going to be a haunted house that these characters are going to have to face, or they're going to have to survive and obviously vacate ASAP. And these types of tropes, settings, and themes are so predictable that we can assign them to specific genres. For instance, a happily ever after? Well, duh, that's gonna be a romance. A twist that one of the characters is a sociopath the entire time? Sounds like a thriller. This unassuming character is the chosen one and will likely save the world? Sounds about right. There's probably fantasy, sci-fi, you get what I'm saying. Genres are so formulaic at this point that they are in themselves predictable. There is a reason why we kind of organize our books by genres and then we pick and choose which ones we're actually going to read. And there is comfort in that. The fact that we have favorite genres, favorite tropes, demonstrates that we as humans do appreciate the comfort that comes with some predictability. It's the reason why we reread books in the first place, that we rewatch our favorite TV shows or movies. We know what's going to happen, but we still end up rewatching them. We re-listen to music that we know every single word to because there's comfort in knowing all of the words and not having to think too much and just being able to shut your brain off, because we live in a world where there is a lot of unpredictability outside of our window. We don't know what's going to happen next. We've got anxiety, we've got worries, we've got stress. And so to be able to simplify our life in certain areas within that life can be really comforting. But let's get back to the narrowed focus that is predictability in books. People who read series, there is inherently predictability as you continue a series. Yes, every single book is individual. There are different scenarios, different conflicts that these characters have to face, but more often than not, you're following the same characters. You're following the same type of narrative style by the author. An author in themselves is predictable, and that's why we have favorite authors. We return to them when they're publishing a brand new book, or we go back to their earlier canon because we do appreciate and trust the fact that we're going to like this author's additional work. We've liked it before. We're predicting that we're going to like it again. We see predictability in reimaginings and retellings, right? There's the original work, but how many times has Frankenstein, Dracula, Agatha Christie, Sherlock Holmes been reimagined in some type of form? Not to mention fairy tales, mythology. I mean, every single year without fail, we will have a list of books that are reimaginings or retellings, and they tend to sell really well. And even when we are trying to recommend books to other people, a lot of times we'll make book comparisons to help them predict whether they're going to enjoy a book or not. If I'm reading a book, I may think, oh wow, this reminds me of Piranesi. And if that's true, then someone who loves Piranesi may be more likely to pick up the book because they liked Piranesi. They're gonna like this book, right? We see it in marketing schemes as well, right? In the blurb of a book, the synopsis. A lot of times there will be a comparison to a really big name author or even a big name TV show. Whatever can get people interested in this book, making a comparison, providing it predictable as far as the experience goes, and people will pick up that book because there is this level of predictability that at least it'll make them feel a certain way by the end of the book. Really, entertainment in all of its forms, especially in books, is formulaic by nature. So there is a lot of predictable elements, from tropes to character archetypes, and you see a lot of books that are satirical nodding to the fact that they recognize how predictable their own narrative structure is. How many mysteries are you reading where an amateur sleuth thinks back to all of the detective fiction books they've read and tries to replicate what the detective would do if they were Hercule Poirot or Sherlock Holmes? In this year alone, I recognized 3 different horror books that nods to how predictable horror elements are. I mean, we've got Horror Movie, we have Bury Your Gaze, and How to Make a Horror Movie and Survive. All 3 of these books nodded to the fact that horror, its elements, its archetypes, are very predictable. In a novel love story by Ashley Poston, I'm pretty sure the main character enters one of her favorite romance books or TV shows or something like that. So it happens all the time. Okay, I know what you're thinking. So a lot of our reading lives are predictable. That doesn't really mean that it's good. That doesn't mean that we'll get mad if we actually see something be unpredictable. Well, I have examples.
Ugh, this is not what I signed up for.
There are moments when predictability is so important that we do get angry when it fails us. As mentioned previously, the idea of marketing failing us when a book is compared to a classic or a well-known, well-loved author and it just doesn't meet the expectations, you get frustrated and you're likely going to take it out on the book, even though it's probably not the author's choice to even make the comparison. It was their marketing team. It was the publishing company that was trying to get people to buy the book immediately, not really considering the longevity, the residual effect of people being really frustrated by this comparison and later readers just choosing not to try the book at all. More and more often, I'm also seeing the predictability of genres failing us. Being able to label a book in the appropriate genre can make or break a book's success. If you're picking up a book and it's been advertised as a thriller, you may get really frustrated when you realize it's actually a mystery, or a mystery thriller that leans mystery. I've seen people get really frustrated by a book that's clearly a thriller, but for whatever reason, they thought it was being marketed as a horror, and the rating for that book is quite low because they think that they've been cheated. That sense of predictability in genre was violated. One that I have seen before, and I do think is going to continue to be a problem, is the romantasy genre blend. So we see romance, we see fantasy, smash them together. We've got this really popular genre blend that has existed for quite some time, but it's only new to the marketing teams, and they are going crazy trying to label every single book under the sun. They may have a little bit of romance or may have a little bit of fantasy under the romantasy umbrella, and readers are getting mad. And then to switch gears to my final thought on why predictability can be really important and can be harmful to a reader when it's violated are content warnings. So triggers that a reader may be trying to avoid, that they do not want to expose themselves to, that is when content warnings are so important. You are seeing more authors taking the precedence to even just include a page, a full-on, very clearly labeled page before the beginning of the book to ensure that the reader knows what they're getting into before they buy the book or before they start reading, because the last thing we want to do is harm a reader's mental or emotional health with a trigger that they didn't expect to be in this book. It's one of the reasons why I'm a huge advocate for StoryGraph specifically as a way to figure out if a book is good for you or not from the get-go. Something that I'm surprised Goodreads hasn't taken and utilized for themselves, because Goodreads has a lot of really great elements to it, but the one thing that it's missing is a section in which readers can categorize a book by its content warnings. So if you decide to look up a book on StoryGraph, go to its profile. At the very bottom, there's a toggle that allows you to see all of the content warnings, and it's labeled from minor, moderate to graphic. So you know how severe that content is and whether it would be good for you to read it or not. As this discussion winds down, I totally understand where people come from when they get frustrated with predictability, and a lot of times it does result in an ending. With that said, I think all genres are predictable, especially the genre that is deemed the most surprising, which is the thriller. I think that's the most predictable of them all, and I know I'm in the minority. So please feel free, as this discussion ends, to leave a comment below, your own thoughts, your own reactions, expand upon any discussions I've missed or that I didn't have time to really get down into the nitty-gritty of it. And if you just want to show me that you've been here, that you've been watching and thinking about this topic as I discuss it, please leave any of the eyeball emojis, because you know, we are seeing into the future, we're predicting things. It feels like it's on brand. If you're someone who really enjoys these types of bookish discussions and debates, I did do a genre hot takes video that I'm really proud of, and I'll have that over here. Thank you for getting to the end. Thank you to my Manor guests for supporting me. I love you guys so much, and I do hope to see everybody in the next one. Bye!